Greetings, and welcome back to the channel Humanity, Facts and Mysteries. History often presents empire as the natural endpoint of civilization. Power consolidates, borders expand, authority centralizes, and those who fail to build lasting states are expected to fade from history. Their names survive only as footnotes, absorbed into the grand narratives of stronger powers, but this model doesn't explain everything. Across Africa, there are civilizations that never became permanent empires or lost their empires early, and yet they endured, not as ruins, not as archaeological curiosities, but as living, breathing identities. The Amazigh and the Nubians are two such civilizations. They developed in vastly different environments, followed different historical paths, and interacted with different global powers. One spread across North Africa, from the Atlantic coast through the Atlas Mountains and deep into the Sahara. The other formed along the Nile, south of Egypt, in a region shaped by the river, trade, and agriculture. They shared no common origin, but they faced the same fundamental historical pressure. How does a civilization survive when it is repeatedly overshadowed by stronger, more dominant powers? Let's start with the Amazigh. They encountered conquest almost continuously. Phoenician trade established bustling coastal cities. Roman administration reshaped urban life and infrastructure. Vandals, Byzantines, Arab caliphates, Ottoman rule, and later, European colonial empires all imposed new systems of authority across North Africa. For centuries, political power rarely remained local. Borders were imposed from the outside. Official languages changed. State religions shifted. By every conventional historical expectation, Amazigh identity should have dissolved into the cultures that ruled over it. But it didn't. The reason lies in how Amazigh civilization was structured. Amazigh identity was never fully centralized. It didn't depend on a single capital city, a single ruling dynasty, or one monolithic political institution. Instead, their culture was distributed across a vast geography rather than concentrated in the state. Their language, oral traditions, customary laws, and social organization all functioned at the local level. Power ruled the cities, but culture lived in the mountains, the villages, and in the fabric of everyday life. This decentralization became a form of protection. When empires collapsed, Amazigh culture did not collapse with them. There was no single center to destroy. There was no institution whose fall would end their continuity. Authority could change without erasing identity. Even religious transformation didn't fully absorb Amazigh culture. Islam spread across North Africa, profoundly reshaping belief and law. But the Amazigh language, customs, and social memory persisted, adapting and thriving beneath the new religious framework. In essence, Amazigh survival depended on flexibility. They absorbed external elements without surrendering their own internal logic. Political loyalty could shift, but cultural belonging remained recognizable. Their civilization continued, proving it didn't require sovereignty to exist. Now, let's turn to the Nubians, who faced a very different historical reality. Unlike the Amazigh, the Nubians formed powerful, centralized kingdoms early on. Along the Nile, the kingdoms of Kush, Napata, and later Meru controlled vital trade routes, immense wealth, and vast territory. Nubian rulers built magnificent monuments, organized formidable armies, and even governed Egypt as one of its most powerful dynasties. Nubian civilization wasn't hidden or dispersed. It was visible, highly structured, and imperial, but this power did not last forever. Over centuries, the Nubian states weakened and eventually collapsed. Egyptian influence returned. Roman authority expanded southward. Later, Byzantine and Arab forces reshaped the region. Political independence disappeared. By that same historical logic, Nubian civilization should have vanished once its kingdoms fell, and yet, it did not. What survived was not the empire but the continuity. Nubian identity remained anchored to place. Villages all along the Nile preserved their language, their kinship structures, and their collective memory, even as rulers came and went. Their culture didn't disperse across a wide geography like Amazigh culture did. Instead, it remained deeply rooted in the landscape. Christianity reshaped Nubian belief for centuries. Later, Islam transformed it again. But these changes didn't erase their identity, they layered over it. Memory accumulated rather than being reset. Nubian survival, therefore, depended on endurance. Where Amazigh culture survived through decentralization and dispersion, Nubian culture survived through the continuity of place and memory. One adapted by spreading out, the other adapted by staying put, to different structures, to different strategies, but the same remarkable result. This contrast between the Amazigh and the Nubians reveals something deeper than just regional history. It exposes to fundamentally different ways civilizations can survive when power is unreliable or fleeting. The Amazigh did not attempt to preserve their civilization through permanence. They didn't anchor their identity to monuments, capitals, or centralized institutions. Instead, their culture was embedded in movement, in oral transmission, and in local autonomy. Language was spoken rather than inscribed on imperial decrees. Law was customary rather than imposed from a throne. Memory lived in families and tribes, not in state archives. This made Amazigh culture incredibly difficult to eliminate. Empires could conquer territory, but they could not fully absorb a civilization that was never confined to a single political form. Authority came and went. Amazigh identity adjusted without disappearing. Culture functioned independently of the state. In this sense, Amazigh civilization became resilient by avoiding concentration. It survived because it could fragment without breaking. Losses were absorbed locally. Continuity didn't depend on a center holding. The Nubians followed the opposite path. Their civilization was once highly visible and centralized. Power was expressed through kingdoms, architecture, and control of trade. Memory was reinforced by place. For them, the Nile was not just geography, it was the very axis of their identity. Life, agriculture, kinship, and belief all flowed along its banks. Identity retreated from the scale of empire into the intimacy of community. Political authority vanished, but social structure remained. Language continued to be spoken. Customs were passed down from generation to generation. Villages became living repositories of memory. Religion changed, but identity endured. Christian Nubia disappeared as a political entity, but Nubian identity did not end with it. Islam later reshaped belief again, yet the culture persisted beneath these new frameworks. This reveals a critical distinction. The Amazigh survived by remaining adaptable. The Nubians survived by remaining rooted. One relied on mobility, the other relied on place. Both strategies successfully avoided a fatal dependency on state power. History often assumes that civilizations must either dominate or vanish. Their survival was not accidental. It was structural. Neither civilization depended entirely on political sovereignty to exist. Neither tied its identity exclusively to its ruling institutions. So when political power disappeared, the culture did not collapse with it. This forces us to reassess how history measures success. Empires are easy to document. They leave behind monuments, borders, and dates. Enduring cultures are much harder to see. They leave continuity rather than ruins. They survive quietly, often beneath layers of conquest and change. The Amazigh and the Nubians remind us that civilization is not synonymous with empire. Power is temporary. Structure is not. A culture that can function without dominance has a different, perhaps more profound, kind of longevity. Some civilizations survive by expanding, others survive by adapting, and still others survive by enduring in place. And history rarely values the last two as much as it should. When the power fades, what remains often matters more than who ruled. Which civilizations do you think survived, not because they built empires, but because they learned how to live without them? Write your thoughts in the comments below. Stay with humanity, facts and mysteries, because the past is never as distant as it seems, once you learn how to see what endures. Thanks for watching.